61 Beetle. I am making another adjustment today, and I wanted to show having to do with my blow-off valves. So I have two blow-off valves, one on the left, one on the right. And what's happening is I have this, I go from both manifold vacuum ports on this side as well as on this side, and then I tee them together so that the overall vacuum, you see how that line goes back behind the blower here onto that side, and that's teed together, and that is what opens the or that's what goes into the vacuum line on the blow-off valve. But what I'm noticing is at idle, it actually flutters, and then it closes on throttle, and then it opens kind of dramatically when you let off the throttle after revving. But what I want, so this is a supercharger setup, not a turbo setup. So what I have read about is that in a turbo setup, you want at idle your blow-off valves to be barely closed, and it doesn't matter because your boost is not being generated when your exhaust sort of velocity is not very high. But in a supercharger setup, the belt is driving this blower at all times, and what you want is for your blow-off valves to be slightly open at idle, so that you're not just pumping the air into a blockade and causing, I mean, it causes all kinds of things. It causes your fuel pressure to go up. It's blocked. It causes your root style blower to get back pressure, and so you're possibly damaging your bearings and everything in here. So what I'm going to do is, I noticed that the blow-off valves come with two springs. Initially they're both in there, and there's a hard spring and a soft spring, and what I'm going to do is swap out. What I had done is I took out the soft spring and only left in the hard spring, but I didn't have both springs, thinking that that was weakening it enough to be open at idle. But what I really want to do is only have the weak spring, and then see if the vacuum at idle can actually open the blow-off valves. So let's do that. Okay, so after removing both of my blow-off valves, what I have here is I've got two springs like this, and initially when these blow-off valves arrived, the springs were like this inside of there, both of them at the same time. So I thought, I want to weaken it a little bit. Took off the small spring, left on the big spring. But what I realized is that idle vacuum does make it barely open so that it flutters, but I want it to be open at idle because this is a supercharger application, and I don't want to just be blowing it into a dead-end street. I want that to be open. So I already did this one. That's where this big spring came from. What I want to do is swap out the firmer spring for the weak spring on this one. I'm going with a weaker spring so this is the setup here. You can see that's the strong spring, and what I want is to just use the weaker spring like this. There's a little ring that it goes onto, and then on this you can see that there's two size rings, and that will go on there. And you can see underneath, this is I can see that that's on there properly, and it has to go. exact same setup. And I can go and reinstall these blow-off valves. We'll see how that works with the weaker spring. All right, back in front of the motor, I've got two blow-off valves. You can see this one with the barb coming out this way is for this side. And I'm gonna replace this clamp so I bought an entire bag of clamps. I have these clamps say 57 to 65. These other ones are, well, that says 64. But basically, my hose goes right on. You can see that, my hose. I got these little clamps for the smaller one, and I have some for the larger one, but I used screw clamps for the larger one. It should be fine. So. Now let's do the other side. That's this guy here. So again, put this thing in here. All right, so final setup here. Vacuum lines coming from both manifold ports there. That's at the bottom of the Weber on the sides. A little 4M fittings down there, clamped in and teed. And then it comes here, tees off to the other blow-off valve, then comes in here. It's my vacuum line, weaker spring, and then this comes up over to the top. This is the what you call the port vacuum, so before the throttle plates, and this tees to my boost gauge and my fuel pressure regulator. Comes across here. Then I have my right hand blow-off valve. Again, I have the 2 cylinders manifold vacuum lines coming in and teed, and then this tees off. This goes to the other blow-off valve and into here. Weaker spring. And then I have my pressure hats. I have my, this is actually very taut, this, because I was getting a little squealing. I have my air intake. The other thing here is, I should mention that I had to change my throttle to be the swivel throttle that goes down lower, because of course normally you have this throttle up top with the bar up top that does your throttle, but this had to make space. You can see there's very little space in here, and then just to make 100% certain this closes fine, if you press right here, it'll actually, you can see there's been a little burn because over the course of this project I've hit the pulley on the inside of this, and it causes a little bit of burn, but I'm not going to worry too much about that. Besides, I can always I can always redo the outside and patch that a little bit. I also had an issue here where this bolt came off and started scraping, and I put this on with where I dimpled this sucker into the, see that little dimple right there, just to make sure that it's not moving, and so I think we should be good. Yeah, I damaged this a little bit, but okay, I'm gonna wait about 2 hours and then I can start this and drive it around. And the other thing that I did, you can see here, I've set up my little camera here so that I can go for a drive, and it's interesting because I clamped in this bar into the inside of the Beetle. That way I can, I had one where the camera fell over, and that was kind of annoying because I had some footage I wanted to see. So I'm gonna give it about 2 hours until it's after 9 a.m. and then we're gonna go for a drive with this new setup with the weaker spring. It's gonna be very interesting to see if it opens at idle and shuts off on throttle, then blows everything off when you let off the throttle plates. If that works all perfectly with the new spring, I give it a very low percentage chance, but we're gonna see. All right, I'm not gonna lie, the little springs have disappointed. So here are the big springs. I think I'm gonna have to put them back in, but I'll show you what it does. I have my left and right blow-off valves. They have the softer springs, and I'm gonna go ahead and start this, and I'll show you what it does. And then if you look at the boost, it's at 0. So it's literally letting all the boost out at idle, okay? Then if I rev it, it pretty much lets all the boost out, letting all the boost out. And then if I look here, it's at 0. It's getting to 2.5 pounds of boost. So those springs, it just doesn't cut it. But here, 11.6. So I'm glad to be getting. Again, I have 2.0 air jets, and I have 1.35 main jets, and so I'm getting the 2.1s and 1.3s, and so I'm going to swap that in. But first, I'm going to reinstitute these bigger springs, because it used to be like 3 to 4 pounds at idle, and 12 pounds was the let off with these springs. So I'm going back to that.